So there's quite a few typing systems out there at the moment, which in some ways conflict. So while these systems are competing with each other and figuring themselves out, the people who want to use them in a practical way, so us, need to pick and choose which parts we think are the most reliable currently. So the socionics typing system has been around for a long time and it's very well known. It describes people as having all 8 of the cognitive functions, and they each have their own unique place and influence on a person. In this video, I want to talk about the polar or point of least resistance function, which in my experience, my observations and my theoretical understanding, seems to be describing something real and accurate. The polar function is essentially the worst function for a type. They neglect it, they don't see the value in it. It's difficult for them to focus on, it bores them, it slows them down. There's a quick way to find a person's polar function, which is to take the third function, so for example an ENTP would have FE as their third function, and just change it from extroverted to introverted. It would become FI. With an INTP, their third function is SI, that would become SE. So you take the third function and change whether it's introverted or extroverted. So I want to go through each type and describe how the polar function manifests for them. These will come in pairs of types because there'll always be 2 types who share a polar function. Okay. ENTPs and ESTPs have FI polar. This can make them out of touch with their values and personal preferences. They can find it difficult to decide which things they like and dislike. Whenever I ask my ENTP friend, for example, to rank things that he thinks are the best TV shows or his favourite things, making those value judgments is actually very difficult for him. They don't gauge the distance or closeness of relationships sometimes. Both ENTPs and ESTPs, more than any other type, have people in their life that they don't actually know if they like them or not. No 2 types have as many frenemies as they do. Making those so-called value judgments is just unusual for them. I've even heard stories from ENTPs and ESTPs where their partner asked them, do you love them? Or a family member asked, do you love your current partner? And let's just say they found it very awkward to answer. It's not because they don't care, it's often because they don't know if they do care or not. So FI polar, in a nutshell, is not knowing how you feel about things and people. INTPs and INFPs have SE polar. This can make them detached from the real, tangible and concrete world. They can often be stuck in their heads or in their imaginations, and kind of oblivious to their environment in some ways. They don't tend to be quick to action, and they dislike being imposed upon and pushed around by the external environment. That can include disliking when people are pushy or aggressive with them. They very much like to move at their own pace, and that pace is very slow. SE polar in a nutshell will come across as being physically detached. ENTJs and ENFJs have SI polar. They can neglect self-care or comfort or TLC. This is not the same as being unfit or out of shape, but rather the tendency to push themselves and overlook ailments. Rest and recovery are rarely at the top of the list for these 2 types. They also tend to be not so good with the small details. They tend to forget or ignore or neglect them. I've heard some commentators speculate that this can manifest as having a bad memory in certain areas. Both types tend to think in generalised and broad terms, rather than in specific instances. Because of their NI, it's almost like they care about their future selves more than their present selves. ISFJs and INFJs have TE polar. I found this to be a trickier one to define, but here are some things. They find organisational decisions and evaluations difficult. Efficiency and effectiveness can be hard to achieve for them. They have their own systems and understandings and frameworks that are often extremely well developed. These systems can be based on intuitive insights or personal experience and knowledge. But when these types have to make decisions based on impersonal data or statistics, they can struggle. ISTJs and INTJs have FE polar. They can commonly come across as emotionally detached or quite stoic. Oblivious to social conventions, they can be quite blunt and sometimes lacking in tact. They tend not to read social and emotional cues from people very well, and they don't play the social game. They're not really concerned with maintaining harmony. The idea of style over substance is very off-putting to them. ESFJs and ESTJs have NI polar. NI is kind of a weird function in general to begin with, so figuring out what NI polar looks like is also quite tricky. It can be failing to see underlying patterns and reoccurring themes. It possibly could manifest in lacking an overall vision in their lives and preferring to be routined and structured in their daily lives. You'll often notice with these 2 types that they're on the go quite a lot and they don't stop to contemplate things that often. I've described them when they're stuck in a rut as sometimes energetically going around in circles, not looking for the deeper meaning behind things, not looking for hidden motives from other people. They're quite concerned with the things and tasks right in front of them rather than figuring out how these things are connected together. They're very grounded and realistic, and don't come across as abstract or philosophical as the NI DOMs can. ISTPs and ISFPs have NE polar. As is often said, they can be unaware of people's intentions. They don't have much time for understanding the most slippery or disingenuous characters of the world, the game players. They have difficulty with ambiguity, uncertainty, doubts and shades of grey. The high NE users tend to be very comfortable with paradoxes, holding two ideas at the same time that totally contradict each other, but seeing the value in both. They tend to be black and white in either their logical or emotional conclusions. They don't really have a high tolerance for overly abstract and tangential descriptions and explanations. They see those people as waffly and almost intentionally vague. In a similar way, they're skeptical of highly novel or innovative approaches and favour more grounded and straightforward methods. ENFPs and ESTPs have TI polar. This can manifest as having issues with detached logical reasoning and conditional logic. They may actually lack objectivity sometimes and the ability to analyse dispassionately. You'll also see them prioritise their individual preferences over more pragmatic decisions. For example, they might decide to travel further to a shop that they like for whatever reason, rather than go into a shop that is closer and for all intents and purposes is pretty much the same. So in the comments below, please let me know your thoughts on your individual polar function and how you've seen it manifest in your life. As always, if you think there's anything that should be added, please let me know.